stops overflowing, put your measuring cylinder underneath like that.
Ian Wright is a school teacher. He teaches science at a school in Sussex in the south of England. He teaches 5 days a week and he likes his job. But in his free time, Ian has another job. He's a train driver. This is the Bluebell Railway. It's a private railway. They only have old steam engines here and beautiful old carriages. About 500 people work here. They work here in their free time, not for money, but because they love the old trains. Ian Wright works here at weekends.
Weekends, I get up at 5:30. I have breakfast, and then I drive from my home at Stenning to the station. It takes about 45 minutes. I arrive at the station at 7 o'clock. I meet my fireman, Russell. He cleans the engine and lights the fire. I check all the controls. The fire heats the water and makes steam. It takes 2 or 3 hours to make enough steam to drive the engine.
How old are the engines, Ian?
Very old. This one's 120 years old.
How much does it cost to mend an engine like this?
Thousands of pounds.
Well, where does the money come from?
From the passengers.
How long does it take?
About 10 years.
And then you drive them?
Exactly, and we drive them.
Is this your engine today?
It is. It's called Baxter. It's a tank engine.
How old is it?
115.
Does it go very fast?
No, it travels at about 30 kilometers per hour.
Ian, is it easy to drive a steam engine?
No, it isn't. It's very difficult. It takes a long time to learn.
What are these controls?
There is the brake. It stops the train. This blows the whistle. This makes the train go faster. And in there is the fire.
Whoa, that's hot. Over 250,000 passengers travel on the Bluebell Railway every year. They go from Sheffield Park Station to Horsted Keynes and back again, up 14 kilometres. The journey there and back takes an hour. The tickets cost £3 for a single and £6 for a return. Driving trains.
I love the power and the noise of the engine. And the smell. I think old trains are very beautiful and very romantic.
day, over 1,000 aircraft take off or land here at Heathrow, the world's busiest international airport. These aircraft carry over 100,000 people to and from 85 countries. But it wasn't always like this.
The first people to fly across the Atlantic were Alcock and Brown in 1919.
Planes were small and slow then. They were also cold, uncomfortable, noisy, and sometimes dangerous. And they couldn't fly at night.
By the Second World War, planes could fly to any country in the world, but there weren't many passenger airports, only military airports. At that time, Heathrow was a small village in the country, with fields all around, but only 15 miles from the centre of London. The fields were flat and open, just right for planes to take off and land. Heathrow Airport opened on the 1st of January 1946.
At first it was small, and there weren't any buildings, just tents for the customs. Plane tickets were very expensive, so only rich people could travel by air.
By 1950, Heathrow was the busiest airport in Europe. There were new jets, which were fast, safe and comfortable, and more people could buy plane tickets. In 1955, 2.6 million passengers used Heathrow. In 1965, there were 10.6 million passengers. By 1980, there were 27 million.
Now, over 42 million passengers use Heathrow every year. They can fly to over 200 destinations, and they take 57 million pieces of luggage with them. So, Heathrow Airport is a very busy place. 54,000 people work here. There are 4 terminals open 24 hours a day. Planes can't take off or land between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. before it stays open. It's a city that never sleeps. This is one of the airport's duty-free shops. Here you can buy spirits, perfumes and cigarettes tax-free. So, how much do people buy? Well, every year these shops sell 1.3 million bottles of perfume, 4 million bottles of alcohol, 12 million cigars, and guess how many cigarettes? 539 million. Ah, fresh air. But of course the air isn't very fresh around here. These planes burn kerosene, lots of kerosene. Every year, planes at Heathrow use about 3 billion litres of fuel. At least kerosene is lead-free. I'm now on one of the passenger aircraft that use Heathrow every day. This is the flight deck of a Boeing 747, a jumbo jet. The plane is nearly 70 metres long and carries 450 passengers. It can fly at 1,000 kilometers an hour at a height of 13,000 meters. These planes can fly non-stop from London to Tokyo. So, let's go. That was easy. But of course, this is only a flight simulator where pilots learn to fly. Enjoy your next flight.
To be or not to be?
To be or not to be?
To be or not to be? That is the question. Those words come from Hamlet, a play that William Shakespeare wrote in 1603. Shakespeare is the most famous British playwright in history. People know his name in almost every country in the world. But who exactly was William Shakespeare? That is the question. Shakespeare was born in this house in Stratford-upon-Avon on the 23rd of April, 1564. Families were big in those days. William had 7 brothers and sisters. But his parents weren't poor. His father, John Shakespeare, was a successful businessman who bought and sold leather and wool. His mother was the daughter of a rich farmer. Young William went to school here. William sat at a desk like this. He learnt Latin and studied the literature of ancient Rome. But he was probably more interested in the groups of actors who travelled from town to town and put on plays in schools, churches, halls and public houses. These plays were very popular, and William probably went to see them after school. When Shakespeare left school, he went to work for his father. But soon after, he met and fell in love with Anne Hathaway, the daughter of a farmer who lived here in this cottage. They got married in December 1582, and just 5 months later, their first daughter, Susanna, was born. William was 18, Anne was 25. What did Shakespeare do for the next 10 years? We don't know exactly. We don't know why he gave up a good job in his father's business and moved to London. We don't know exactly when or why he became an actor and playwright. All we know is that in 1592 he wrote his first play. After that, his plays became popular very quickly, and he made a lot of money. "400 years ago, Shakespeare built a theatre, the Globe, here in the centre of London. It was one of London's first theatres. This is the new Globe Theatre. It will be exactly like Shakespeare's theatre. It was round and had no roof over the centre, like the theatres of ancient Rome. Okay in Rome, not such a good idea in cold, rainy London. The people of London loved going to the theatre. The Globe could hold 3,000 people. Some people sat to watch the plays. Others stood in the middle, in front of the stage. The audience were usually noisy, often clapping and cheering and shouting to the actors. And there were only actors, no actresses. Young boys played the parts of women. It often rained in London then too, and everyone got very wet. In 1610, after about 25 years in London, Shakespeare came back here to Stratford. He was rich, and he had a big house, where he enjoyed life with his family and friends. But he didn't stop writing plays. What can people in Stratford tell us about Shakespeare?
I can tell you that he was born on April 23rd, 1565. I'm unsure about the last date. And he died on the same day.
I know he was English. He was born in Stratford-upon-Avon. This is his house right here. He wrote a lot of plays.
Can you name any of the plays that Shakespeare wrote?
Hamlet,
As You Like It, Romeo and Juliet.
Macbeth, Midsummer's Night Dream.
Hamlet, Macbeth, Coriolanus.
Do you know the name of his wife, other than Mrs. Shakespeare?
No.
No?
No, I'll take a guess. Guinevere?
Nearly.
Anne Hathaway.
Can you remember any famous lines that Shakespeare wrote?
No.
To be or not to be?
To be
Or not to be.
all the world's...
The stage.
There are 3 theatres in Stratford where you can see one of Shakespeare's plays almost every night of the year. This is the Swan Theatre, which is like a theatre from Shakespeare's day. What kind of plays did William Shakespeare write? Well, he wrote 39 plays. Some of them are comedies, for example, A Midsummer Night's Dream and A Comedy of Errors. They have happy endings.
Well run, Thisbe!
Others are stories from English history. For example, stories about the kings of England. They are very patriotic. Queen Elizabeth I often went to see them. And the others are tragedies, such as Hamlet and Macbeth. These are sad, dark stories of murder and revenge.
My lord, it comes. Angels and ministers of grace, defend us.
I am thy father's spirit.
All of his plays are translated into many different languages and are famous all over the world. Shakespeare died on his 52nd birthday in 1616. He is buried here in Holy Trinity Church, Stratford. But the characters in his plays are still with us today.
Discovered it nearly 5,000 years ago. The Chinese call it cha or tea. Now people drink it all over the world. In Britain, it is the most popular drink. We use 12,000 million litres of water every year to make it. And the average British person drinks 3.5 cups per day, usually with milk, and sometimes with sugar.
Which do you prefer, tea or coffee?
Tea.
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 How many cups of tea do you drink a day?
About 4, I would think.
About 10.
I would say about 12 on average. Yeah.
About 4 cups a day.
About 10.
I like a nice cup of tea in the morning, for to start the day, you see. And at 11:30, well, my idea of heaven is a nice cup of tea. I like a nice cup of tea with me dinner, and a nice cup of tea with me tea. And when it's time for bed, there's a lot to be said for a nice cup of tea.
We make tea from this, the dried leaves of a plant called Camellia sinensis. It grows naturally in China and India. The biggest tea exporters are Sri Lanka, India, China and Kenya. They produce about 70% of the world's tea. But when did tea first come from the east to the west? In the 17th century, sailing ships from Europe travelled all over the world. In 1610, a Dutch ship brought a small box of tea from China to Holland. 40 years later, in 1650, tea arrived in Britain. Samuel Pepys, who lived in London at that time, wrote in his diary on Sunday the 25th of September, 1660.
I tried a cup of tea, a China drink, of which I never drank before.
Tea became very popular. In the 19th century, the Americans designed a new type of ship to bring tea from China to the West. These ships were called tea clippers, and they were the fastest ships in the world. This is the Cutty Sark, the most famous British tea clipper. It was built in 1869.
In the early 1800s, the Duchess of Bedford started the tradition of afternoon tea.
She thought she'd like to have something between lunch and dinner. A cup of tea and something to eat. Fortunately, at about the same time, the Earl of Sandwich had a good idea. He put a filling between 2 pieces of bread and gave it his name. Afternoon tea quickly became a very fashionable new custom.
When do you drink your tea?
Mostly morning and evening.
Morning, afternoon, and before going to bed.
All the time. I work in an office, so we're always drinking tea all through the day.
In the morning, dinner times, tea time, in the evening, before I go to bed.
Throughout the day, really. Mostly in the morning.
In most factories and offices in Britain, people stop work for a few minutes in the middle of the morning and in the middle of the afternoon to have a cup of tea and maybe a biscuit. This is called a tea break, a tradition that started about 200 years ago. In the last century, some employers tried to stop the tea break. They said it made the workers lazy. But it was too late, and today millions of people look forward to their tea breaks every day.
People drink more tea in Britain than in any other country. The average person drinks 1,355 cups per year. Next is Ireland, then New Zealand, Turkey, and Australia. In the rest of Europe, they prefer to drink coffee.
Most of us think that climbing is a bit dangerous. People who climb think that it's an exciting hobby. Chris and Lucy are experienced climbers. They go climbing almost every day. But for them, it isn't a hobby, it's their job. And they don't climb mountains, they climb buildings.
This is Coventry Cathedral. It's famous for its windows, and as you can see, it's got a lot of them. Some of the windows are very big, so they're difficult to clean. That's why Chris and Lucy are here today. They're going to clean the west window. It's 22 meters high and 12 meters wide. That's 264 square meters of glass to clean on each side. That's a lot of glass.
So what are you doing then, Chris?
We're preparing the equipment.
And is this an extremely important part of the job?
Oh, it's essential. Without this equipment, we couldn't do the job, and it has to be very well prepared so that we are safe.
Mm. So what are the names of the different pieces of equipment?
This is a jammer, and we use it to clip into the rope and slide up the rope.
Mm.
This thing's called a rescue sender. It's a safety device, and it's very, very strong.
Good.
We use this to slide down the rope. It's called a stop.
Mm. This is a helmet, I know that much.
Helmet's essential in case anyone drops anything on you or you bang your head.
This is the most important part of the equipment, the window cleaner. Oh.
Yeah, Matthew's right, isn't he, Justin?
Now they're putting the equipment on. This is called rigging up. It's a routine. They do it the same way every time.
Okay, then, if we start in the middle...
Right, I'll go out first,
Yeah.
along. We've already set the ropes, so that shouldn't take too long.
Okay.
Lucy and Chris are planning the day's work. It's very important for them to discuss exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to do it.
Change ropes then.
Yeah.
And we'll come straight down. The only thing we've got to watch out for is make sure that any loose stuff like this doesn't bang through the window.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's it's going to be very sad to damage one of these.
They're walking across the roof of the cathedral, high above the city. Here they are at the top of the west window. They fixed some ropes to the wall yesterday, so they're ready to start immediately. Chris is making a final check of the equipment. and now he's carefully stepping off the roof onto the ropes. Lucy's got a problem. She can't open the clip. Chris is telling her what to do.
With your, hold on with your right hand and unclip with your left. And pull your right leg under you to take all your weight. Done it? Okay, you're going to stop on these two. And that'll be your ropes.
This is the dangerous job. I'm holding the ropes. It's all right, I've got them.
Thanks, Michael.
Now they're coming slowly down the ropes. Chris and Lucy work for a company called Wall Walkers. Their job is to repair and clean parts of buildings that are difficult to reach. When they're working, the most important thing is safety. They look at each other all the time to check that everything is all right. They always work in pairs, never alone. And they each have 2 independent ropes, so that if, for example, one rope breaks, the other rope stops them falling. They're cleaning the windows. It's going to be a long job.
Lucy! You missed a bit, just there.
Do you want to come up and do it?
Later.
Somebody once asked the mountaineer George Mallory why he wanted to climb Mount Everest. He replied, because it's there. Let's ask Chris and Lucy why they like climbing.
Do you like this job?
Yeah.
I love it.
It's great fun.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, what other buildings do you climb?
Offices, monuments.
Church towers, anything at all.
All right. Why do you like it?
It's great fun being high up.
I enjoy the climbing, the problem solving. Every job is different, every job is difficult, and you have to try and solve that problem.
Wouldn't you like a normal job in a nice warm office somewhere?
No.
Oh no, not
Boring.
at all.
Well, all right, when you finish this, you can come and clean my windows.
It would be a pleasure.
There's a lot of dirt on this window, and it's very difficult to clean. It's very cold up here, and it's a long way down. I wouldn't like to do this every day, would you? Excuse me.
16h sur BBC Afrique. Bonjour, Bosnie, la Russie va aider l'ONU à mettre fin au siège de la...
tafaasiisha wadahadalladaasi waxa ay noqonayaan isla markaasi wuxuu ka socotay hay-adda
15 hours, Greenwich Mean Time.
BBC World Service. The news read by Murray Holgate. American fighter planes have shot down 4 combat aircraft by...
Sommet des ministres africains des Finances à Libreville. À l'ordre du jour, le problème de la dette extérieure du continent, une dette de 260 milliards de dollars.
This is Bush House in London, headquarters of the BBC World Service. From this building, the BBC broadcasts radio programs to the whole world.
The World Service used to be called the Empire Service. When it started in 1932, it broadcast only in English and provided news and information to people in the British colonies. This is a recording of the very first broadcast.
This is London calling. Before beginning our first program, Mr. J. H. Whitley, the chairman, and Sir John Reith, the Director General of the BBC, are going to speak to you.
The announcers used formal English and used to speak very slowly and clearly. After 6 o'clock, they used to change into dinner jackets to read the news. In the 1930s, Hitler and Mussolini started broadcasting propaganda to the Middle East. So, in 1938, the World Service also started broadcasting to the Middle East, in Arabic, to counteract the influence of the fascist propaganda. Very soon, the BBC was broadcasting to all the countries occupied by the Nazis. During the Second World War, the BBC reported British defeats, as well as British victories, and so it got a reputation for honesty and accuracy. After the war, the BBC continued its foreign language broadcasts, and to this day broadcasts the news in 39 languages.
wasiirada lacagta ee Afrika ayaa lagu wadaa in ay ku kulmaan caasimadda Gabon ee Libreville maanta si ay uga wada hadlaan.
This is a live news broadcast to Somalia. Over 40% of the population listen to these broadcasts every day because they cannot get accurate news and information in their own country. Here in the newsroom, 120 journalists work day and night, writing 200 news bulletins every 24 hours. Every news story is checked at least twice before it is broadcast. The BBC will not broadcast a story until it is sure that it is true. When President Gorbachev was under house arrest in the Soviet Union in 1991, he said that he learnt the truth about what was happening in his country by listening to the BBC World Service.
We found some old radios in the service quarters and were able to set up aerials. The lads were able to figure out how to do that. And we began to see what we could get. And we got the BBC best of all.
This means the World Service is not always popular with governments. For example, the former Soviet Union jammed the broadcast for many years, so that it was difficult for Russian people to listen to the BBC News. Even the British government was very angry when the World Service broadcast a speech criticizing the government during the Suez Crisis in 1956.
The BBC is the world's largest international broadcaster. Every week, 130 million people listen to BBC World Service radio. In 1992, the World Service started broadcasting television programs too, via satellite to Europe, Asia and Africa. Now, people in countries all around the world can see, as well as hear, the news from the BBC.
In the heart of the English countryside, you feel that life hasn't changed for centuries. Here it is quiet and peaceful. People can escape from the cities and their crowds, pollution and noise. This is King's Sutton, a village in Northamptonshire, about 40 miles from the huge industrial city of Birmingham. Many of the houses in the centre of the village are 300 or 400 years old.
This square certainly hasn't changed much. For centuries, this was the whole village.
At the end of the square stands the church of St. Peter and St. Paul. It was built between 1220 and 1450 and is the oldest building in the village. But life here has changed a lot, and most of the changes have happened during this century. King Sutton used to be a farming community. At the beginning of this century, about 1,000 people lived in the village, and most of them worked on farms in the area. But nowadays, machinery does the work of horses and men, and only 7% of the population work in agriculture.
In the past, the villagers rarely travelled outside the village. They could buy almost everything they needed at the local shops. Morning. This was the village bakery. The baker used to make bread for the whole village, but I don't think any bread has been made here recently.
Elsie Merry was born in the village and has lived here all her life. Her father was the village baker.
Elsie, when did your father open the bakery?
He came to the bakery in 1915. He's always been a bakery from 1802, but he came in 1915 during the First World War.
Was it hard work baking bread?
Very hard work, yes, yes. Up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock on Saturday morning, always.
So when did the bakery close?
2 years ago, 2 years last Easter.
Many of the other shops have closed too. That's strange because there are now 2,000 people living here. The population has doubled since 1945. And the village is much bigger. New housing estates have been built for the newcomers. But not many of the people who live in these houses work in the village.
You see, King Sutton isn't a self-sufficient community anymore. The villagers work in nearby towns, and they do most of their shopping there too, in large markets. How do they get there? Not by bicycle, but by car and train.
Why do you like living in King Sutton?
It's friendly, it has good facilities, good communication, it's just a good community.
I like the people mostly, and quite a bit goes on, so it's quite interesting, and it's reasonably peaceful.
I like the village life. I've always lived here. I like the community life. The only thing I don't like is that everybody knows your business.
Well, I like it living here better than living anywhere else, really.
If you lived in a town, do you think life would be better?
Well, I don't think life would be better because there'd be a lot more noise and danger and stuff like that.
Well, you could go to the cinema, you could go swimming, and there'd be better sports facilities.
I think there'd be more to do and probably more people.
We came here because we didn't want to be in a town, we wanted to be in a village.
A new motorway between London and Birmingham was completed in 1992, and it passes close to the village. How does this affect village life?
Well, there's a lot of complaint about the noise and pollution from the motorway, but it does improve
communications, those who use cars, travel. And a lot of them work in London, so they can commute quite easily down there now, providing there are no traffic jams.
So is life in King Sutton better than it was in the past, or worse?
Well, it's better in the sense that we have gas, water, electricity and main drainage, so life for most people is more comfortable. The village has doubled in size, but the trouble is that most of the new residents don't work in the village, so they're commuters. So we've lost a lot of the community spirit which used to exist.
It's still quite strong, then?
It's still quite strong, especially amongst the older people.
Life in King Sutton has changed a lot during this century. If more and more people move out of the cities, the village will continue to change. But let's hope that here at the heart of King Sutton, there will always be peace and quiet.
The first double-decker buses appeared in London in 1851.
They were invented to help carry the thousands of people who visited the great exhibition that was held that year. The first double-deckers were rather different from those we see today. They were pulled by horses, and they didn't have a roof. It wasn't until 1925 that the first fully covered bus appeared. Today, there are 3,500 double-deckers in London alone. There are 7 different types, and they can carry as many as 89 passengers. Most large cities and towns in Britain have double-decker buses. They're also used in South Africa, Australia, the Netherlands, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Berlin. The British Parliament has become the model that is followed by all democratic countries. It is the main law-making body in Britain and consists of 2 houses, the House of Lords and the House of Commons.
No. It shouldn't be run for bankers and speculators.
The House of Commons has 651 elected members. Here, all new laws are debated. Sometimes the debates last for many hours, and they can become extremely heated.
It wasn't worth waiting for, I have to tell the right honourable gentleman.
Order! Order! And order in this house. Tony Blair!
In 1605, there was an unsuccessful attempt to blow up the Houses of Parliament. The failure of the gunpowder plot, as it's known, is celebrated every year on November the 5th. The typical milkman gets up at about 3 o'clock in the morning to start his daily round, delivering milk to the doorsteps of about 500 houses. "95% of British people think that having milk delivered by the milkman is a great tradition which should not be lost. But only 40% actually buy their milk from the milkman. However, that is still 4.45 billion pints of milk each year. And most milk is delivered in glass bottles. Mass production of milk bottles started in the 1920s when pasteurization was introduced.
Having treated the milk to kill bacteria, it was important that it was protected. Today, these bottles are washed and reused at least 12 times. Cricket is a game played by two teams of 11 players. One team bowls and the other team bats. The team who are batting try to hit the ball as far as possible. The other team tried to hit the wicket. Yes! Or catch the ball to get the batsman out. The winning team is the one that scores the most runs. The first known cricket rules were written in 1744, and the sports governing body, the Marylebone Cricket Club, known as the MCC, was formed in 1787. Cricket matches can last from an afternoon to 5 days for an international game, which is called a test match. The English country garden originated in medieval times. Then it was a place to grow herbs like parsley, sage and rosemary, which were used to flavour food. Gradually, other plants were introduced, especially flowers for decoration. Walls were built to give shelter to delicate plants, and gardens became more ornamental. English gardens today contain hundreds of varieties of flowers, fruit and vegetables. Many of these didn't originally grow in Britain. Gardening has become one of the most popular British hobbies. If you're good at making things grow, then you're said to have green fingers. The British weather has a bad reputation. People are always complaining about it, and going abroad for holidays has become a popular way of avoiding it. In fact, the British climate is actually quite good. The winters are relatively mild and the summers are not too hot. Many other places are much wetter. Even northern Spain and Portugal have more rain than some parts of Britain. The problem is that the weather here is very changeable. This is because Britain is an island on the edge of Europe and might receive wet weather from the Atlantic, hot weather from Africa, or cold weather from the Arctic. It's quite nice today, though. Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire is one of the most mysterious prehistoric sites in Britain. Who built it? Why did they build it? How did they build it? The stone circle was built approximately 4,500 years ago, probably as a site for religious ceremonies.
Stonehenge may also have been used as an astronomic observatory. Watching the sun and moon rise over certain stones would have shown the exact time of year. These stones weigh nearly 4 tons. The people who built Stonehenge probably dragged some of these stones all the way from South Wales, a distance of almost 400 kilometres.
Dr. Armstrong lifted the lifeless hand and felt for the pulse. Then he turned to the others and said, and his voice was expressionless, dead, far away, "He's been shot." But who shot him? That's the question posed by the world's best-selling crime writer, Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie was an immensely prolific writer. She wrote 79 crime novels, approximately 150 short stories, 4 non-fiction books, and 19 plays. More than 3 billion copies of her work have been sold in 146 languages. What makes her work so popular?
Agatha Christie's work is popular with people who like the classical murder mystery, I think, because of the quality of the puzzle in the work, the ingenuity of the plots, the way in which she would present the puzzle. Normally there'd be a group of people in an isolated place of some kind, whether they're on a boat going up the Nile or whether they're in an English country house, marooned for the weekend for one reason or another, or on an island off the coast, again, inaccessible. A group of people, and into this group intrudes this violent act of murder, except that it isn't violent. There isn't very much actual violence in Agatha Christie at all, and I think that makes them popular with the kind of reader who likes the intrigue of the puzzle, who likes the mystery, almost in the way in which other people might like doing crossword puzzles, but who does not want violence, who does not want blood and sort of guts splattered all over the place. So it is that kind of thing, the well-mannered murderer, you might say, that she specializes in, and that, I think, is the secret of her popularity.
What's special about the detectives in her novels?
I think what's special about her detectives is that the 2 major detectives throughout her books, and they appear from the earliest to the very last ones, are so different from each other. Hercule Poirot, her most famous detective, began his life as a member of the Belgian police force. When we first meet him, he's already retired. He's a funny little man. He's only about 5 foot, 5'2". He has luxuriant moustaches, which he's very, very proud of. And he's a rather comical character. He's also very vain, has a very great opinion of himself. He's a complete contrast to her other major detective, who is not a professional, never has been a professional detective of any kind. She is a nice old spinster called Miss Marple, who lives in a village where they seem to have a rather high incidence of murders in and around the vicinity. And she, just by virtue of taking thought, works out exactly what has happened in each case. She's the absolute opposite to Poirot. She's an intelligent woman, but she's not a flamboyant personality. She's very modest, and the contrast between these two is absolutely extraordinary.
Her writing seems to appeal to the detective in so many of us. Her murder mysteries are like a game of skill. In this detective board game, Cluedo, the players have to deduce who committed the murder, which takes place in a country house. Similarly, in Agatha Christie's work, the reader has to solve the mystery of who done it. A number of strangers are gathered together. They know very little about each other, but they do know that someone in the group is the murderer. In Agatha Christie's country house settings, a murder takes place in nearly every room. The drawing room, the dining room, the kitchen, and of course the library. Her victims die in a number of unpleasant ways, but her favourite means of murder is by poisoning. It was while working in a local hospital during the First World War that Agatha Christie learnt about poisons. The use of poison is so accurately described in her work that she even won praise from the Journal of Pharmacy. Whenever there is a poisoning, or any other type of murder, one of Agatha Christie's detectives is soon on the scene.
Hark, look. It's Miss Buckley.
Finally, the identity of the murderer is revealed. But what about the identity of Agatha Christie herself? Agatha Christie was born in Devon in 1890 and died in 1976. Educated at home by her mother until the age of 16, she started writing short stories to entertain herself at a very early age. She completed her first novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, by the age of 21. And when it was published in 1920, success followed rapidly. Although she enjoyed her success, she avoided publicity. In fact, she was famous for not giving information about herself, and found that she had nothing to say in interviews. One of her rare public appearances was to celebrate the 21st year of The Mousetrap. This phenomenally successful play is the longest-running show in the world. It opened in London in 1952 and is still today. Out of the public eye, Agatha Christie spent much of her time either travelling abroad with her second husband, the archaeologist Max Mallowan, or writing at her home in Devon, a few miles from where she was born. But there was a period in her life which would have challenged the skills of even her most perceptive detectives. In December 1926, Agatha Christie disappeared for 11 days. Her car was found abandoned by the side of a country road. A nationwide search was launched, and eventually she was found in a hotel in Harrogate, many miles from her home.
She suddenly disappeared in circumstances which made it seem likely that she'd either killed herself or possibly her husband had murdered her and disposed of the body. The newspapers were excited about this. Her readers were terribly excited about it. The first weekend of her disappearance, 15,000 people were searching the Downs, helping the police look for clues. All she says about this in her autobiography, I think, is in 2 or 3 lines. Something like, I became ill, there was breakdown and agony for a time, but eventually life went on, and so on.
Apart from her family, no one really knows what happened in those 11 days. What is known is that the period preceding them was exceptionally unhappy. To find clues to how she really felt at that time, we have to turn to the novel she wrote under the pseudonym Mary Westmacott. In these love stories, she explores the psychological and emotional lives of her characters. Agatha Christie was a very private person, and for nearly 20 years it was not known that she and Mary Westmacott were one and the same. In the world of Agatha Christie, true identities are kept a mystery until the very end.
Britain is surrounded by sea. The sea has shaped the British Isles and has had a profound influence on the life of the British people. For centuries, the British endeavoured to rule the waves. We had a powerful navy. Explorers found new sailing routes and discovered new lands. Many of our national heroes were sailors. Socially and economically, British life was dominated by the sea. The fishing and shipbuilding industries were of huge economic importance. British shipyards built some of the world's finest ships, and the seaside attracted crowds of holidaymakers, despite the British weather.
In the last 50 years, the number of fishermen has fallen by over a half. Today, there are fewer than a dozen major shipyards in operation, whereas before the Second World War, there were nearly 100. The economic significance of the sea is declining, and Britain no longer has a vast navy. But for many British people, the sea still plays an important part in their lives.
Both my grandfathers went to sea in sailing ships carrying cargo. My father went to sea in sail. They went to the Mediterranean and Newfoundland and the Caribbean. My mother's father was a shipwright, shipbuilding in Salcombe, and he was in Salcombe until the wooden shipbuilding died out. But he went to sea as ship's carpenter on sailing vessels. And my father's father went to sea on sailing vessels that were Salcombe built also. The sea has always been part of my life. I can't imagine life without it, really.
My father had been in the Royal Navy for 2 World Wars, and I suppose the sea was in my blood, although that sounds a bit of a cliche. Having said that, my son, who's 19, he's gone to sea after me. But the big point, I suppose, is travelling around the world, because I must have been around the world, I suppose, 25 times whilst I was at sea with P&O, and loved every minute of it.
I've just always loved the sea, and I like the sea when it's wild, but from the land. I prefer it not so wild when I'm on a boat. Every emotion you can think of, the sea will portray it. Sometimes it's like a really kindly mother, and other times it's just so dangerous and scary, exhilarating, and everything in between.
A yacht sailing along in the wind is one of the most romantic images of the sea.
Sailing has become a very popular sport around the coast of Britain. Thousands of people learn to sail all sorts of different boats. Anything from small dinghies to ocean-going yachts.
It gets me away from work pressure, because when you're sailing, you have to focus on that and nothing else. So it's a good relaxation. You've got plenty of clean air. You can get away from people that you really don't want to be around. And conversely, you can be around people that you want to be around, because when you're in a boat with someone, you have to get on with them.
You can go and live in places that you'd never ever be able to have a house or even stay, and you can stay for as long as you want and move on. And you can go out to sea, or you can come in and stay in the creeks, and it's just endless, really.
The sea is wild and unpredictable.
Part of the excitement is the challenge of the unknown. But the sea can also be extremely dangerous. An enemy, not a friend.
Around the coast of the British Isles, there are more than 200 lifeboat stations. Rescue crews of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution are called out nearly 5,000 times a year and save on average 1,500 lives. The lifeboat crews are nearly all volunteers.
I think all waters are dangerous everywhere. I think the great danger is that people perhaps don't prepare their boats or themselves sufficiently for going out. That can be very dangerous no matter where you are.
Anyone can buy a boat and just go set off in it with an engine on the back. They're not required in England to have safety equipment, which in my view is quite appalling. So you have in August here several thousand of these boats, a lot with no safety equipment and people that don't necessarily know what they're doing. So the recipe is there for a lot of chaos on the water.
How long does it take to launch the lifeboat?
We normally do it in about 6 minutes, from the first call for the crew, which is done on pages, through to the lifeboat leaving the moorings. The crew for this lifeboat is 7, and we have 14 members who are there to choose from. There's only one permanent member of the crew here, and that's the coxswain mechanic, which is Frank Smith. All the rest are volunteers, and they all have other jobs.
It's a great reward to be able to take somebody ashore and realise you've saved their life.
Gives you a very nice feeling when you've been out and done something and saved somebody. You can't describe it, really.
What's your own attitude to the sea? Do you think it's dangerous?
Oh yeah, the sea has got to be respected. It's, you can never beat the sea. You try to equal it, but you'll never beat it.
Despite all the dangers and sometimes feeling seasick, there's nothing that quite compares with this sense of freedom.
Perhaps the sailors who set out to discover new worlds felt the same desire to escape from everyday life on land. The black cab, one of the most common sights on the streets of London, and a much-loved form of transport. About 300,000 people take a cab every day.
The problem is finding one for hire.
London cabs haven't always been so popular. When the first motorised cabs appeared in 1903, they were slow, noisy and smoky. Londoners were often scared to ride in them. Over the years, various companies attempted to refine the design. The London cab as we know it today
was first launched in 1959 and has remained virtually unchanged ever since.
At last. Taxi! Buckingham Palace, please. Thank you.
The height of the cab's interior is a spacious 1.29 meters, and the distance between the facing seats must be at least 43.18 centimeters. This was originally to ensure that if a lady and gentleman sat opposite each other, their knees would not meet.
Here we are, madam, Buckingham Palace.
Oh, I'm not stopping here. What really makes London cabs so special are the drivers, or cabbies as they're often known.
So what is it like being a cab driver?
Very difficult. It's quite a responsibility, taking people around, having them in your charge.
In London, it's great fun, it really is.
The best thing about being a cab driver is if you don't want to get up in the morning and go to work, you don't.
So what are the good parts of the job?
The good parts of the job, you can go home when you want, you can get out of bed when you want and go to work when you want. There's no boss telling you when to go to work, when not to go to work, and that's the great part about the job.
It's very, very flexible.
And the bad parts?
When you don't go to work, you don't get paid, and the traffic.
Going to work, that's the bad part about it.
How many hours do you work a day?
Between 10 and 12, approximately.
About 10 to 12 hours a day.
How many journeys do you make on an average day?
About 30, I would say.
An average cab driver, if he's working in the centre of London, does 25 trips a day.
About 25 to 30 a day, usually.
So how many miles do you travel a day?
I would say I do 150 to 200 every day.
About 120 to 130 miles a day.
And how far do you drive?
Anywhere that people want to go.
So you go to Scotland?
Go to Scotland if you can pay.
How many cab drivers are there in London?
About 21,000.
And how many of them are female?
Now, a couple of hundred.
Can you tell me what the cabs are like to drive?
They're very good now. Up until about 5 years ago, they didn't have power steering or power brakes, which made it very difficult.
So are the cabs easy to drive?
Yes, they are. They're beautiful. Power steering, electric windows, power brakes, have a CD player, everything I could possibly want.
Ask a cab driver to take you anywhere in London, and he or she will almost certainly know exactly where to go. That's because all cab drivers have to go through a very tough and thorough training called the knowledge. People who want to be cab drivers have to learn the name of every street in central London. There is no grid system, like there is in New York, for example, to make the task easier. London has a medieval street pattern. There are 16,000 streets in an area of 113 square miles, and they have to know exactly where each one is. They also have to memorize routes, or runs as they are called. Getting on a moped and driving around is the only way to do this. But that's not all. They also have to know where to find every restaurant, hotel, theatre, cinema, department store, and public building on every street. No wonder it's called the knowledge.
To learn the streets, you go out on a moped, because it's the only way to learn. If you went in a car, you would cause an accident because you have to keep stopping to have a look at the buildings. You have to learn nearly all the streets in central London and a lot of the buildings there. For example, all the airlines, all the embassies, all the hotels. And when you're examined, you're not asked the main hotels, you're asked the very small ones.
The learner cabbies are tested on a regular basis. They have to pass one stage of the knowledge before they can move on to the next. The tests are difficult and the failure rate is high. Only 3 in 10 learner cab drivers will go on to become London cabbies.
So how long did it take you to learn the knowledge?
It took me 18 months to do the knowledge.
It can take anything from 2 years to 5 years. It took me 22 months.
Is it difficult to learn?
Very. And at this time of the year when it's cold, you get extremely cold on the bike. You can spend 5 or 6 hours out on your small motorbike learning all these things, writing all these things down.
So you've got to be prepared to give up a lot of time, a lot of social time, and work extremely hard almost every evening.
If the learner cab driver passes the final exam, he is awarded his license. He also receives what is known as a Bible, not the religious kind, but a rule book. It deals with an essential part of the job, passengers.
Are most passengers polite?
Yes, the majority of them are.
95% of the people are very polite.
85% of the passengers are polite, yes.
Who are the best passengers?
The best passengers are the poorest people, actually, who can't even afford a car, and yet, you see, and they're very generous and very sweet and kind.
Polite ladies.
Just people in general that are happy. They're always good to you.
So who are the worst passengers?
The worst passengers are people who give you the wrong address and then moan when you can't find where they want to go.
Have you had any famous people in your cab?
I have, yes, quite a few. It's difficult to remember all of them, but Joan Collins very recently, Robin Williams.
Dustin Hoffman.
Duchess of Kent.
Sean Connery.
Clint Eastwood.
Muhammad Ali, Charlton Heston.
Annie Lennox.
Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman.
And still on the subject of passengers, has anything funny ever happened to you?
Yes, once in the city, a Japanese man flagged me down and said he wanted to go to what I thought was Ascot, but it was Earl's Court. Luckily, I questioned him because Ascot is a long way out of London and a very expensive journey, and we found out it was Earl's Court.
Thanks very much. Number 9 there. Yeah, but Horseway Road, please. That's first call. Yeah, Papa Sierra, 05.
To provide an even better service, many cabbies belong to radio-controlled taxi services like this one. Here at Computer Cab, they handle 1 call a second, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. All their cabs are fitted with transmitters that are tracked by satellite. When a call comes through, the controller looks at the screen to find out the exact location of each cab and can then send out the cab nearest to the caller. The technology may be much more sophisticated than in the early days of the London cab, but one thing never changes. Wherever you want to go in London, you can be sure a cabbie will always know how to take you there. Can you take me home, please?
Of course, madam.
The public school is one of the great British institutions. This is one of the best known, Rugby School in Warwickshire, in the heart of the English Midlands. Rugby School was founded in 1567 and aims to provide its pupils with the highest standard of education.
We call them independent schools now because they're not public at all, they're actually private. But it's a fee-paying school, and one which provides a whole range of facilities for boys and girls.
What age do the pupils start here?
Here it's at 11, but only 2 small classes for day pupils at 11 and 12. The main entry is at 13.
And where do they come from?
From all over Britain, and certainly quite a few from abroad. About 11% come from overseas. Nowadays, parents have changed their views about boarding school. They actually like to come and visit their children and to watch them playing games and to hear them playing music and so on. So quite a lot of the parents live within about an hour and a half of the school in the Midlands area of England. But still, quite a few come from Scotland, thank goodness, and from the north of England, from the West Country, and so on. So it is still a national school and not just a local one.
And what is special about Rugby School?
One of the interesting things, there are quite a lot of special things, I think, is the mixture, the juxtaposition of what is old and what is new. If you walk around Rugby School and look at the buildings, you do get the sense of families having been here. It's an old school, it's been on the go for hundreds of years, so there is a feeling of tradition, but at the same time it's a very innovative school and tries to do lots of new things.
The facilities are exceptional and the tradition gives the whole school a sense of community and a real atmosphere.
I like the way that you live with people in your year for 5 years and you get to be really good friends with them, and then after you finished here, maybe go to university with them.
So how many days a week do you have school?
6 days. We have a full day on Monday, we have half day on Tuesday, full day Wednesday, half day Thursday, full day Friday, and then half a day on Saturday. And then Sunday's free time. We have chapel in the morning, but that's about it.
The days are very long and you have lessons 6 days a week, which is hard work, but in general, I really enjoy it.
Our dormitory's through here. We have 8 people sleeping here. This is my bed here, and my wardrobe here. Got some drawers here to keep my clothes in, things like that. Shoes can go in here. And about 10, we've got to be up here by about 9:45. And at 10, a senior boy comes up and turns off the lights. He sleeps over there. He comes up at about 11 o'clock. In fact, he just joins in with the fun. You know, it's really good in the dorm. This is the language lab where we can record some of our own conversations, watch videos in different language. We can use the computers to type in other languages, write essays, watch TV from different countries. You can learn a whole variety of languages: Russian, German, Latin. Basically any language that you'd like to learn, you can learn it here.
The school gave its name to this, rugby football. The game was invented here. During a game of football in 1823, a pupil called William Webb Ellis ran with the ball instead of kicking it. Such initiative is encouraged in pupils today.
William Webb Ellis in 1823 took the ball in his arms, and in those days you weren't allowed to do that. I suspect his friends didn't like him very much for that and thought that he'd spoilt things, and it took really quite a large number of years before that was incorporated into the game. But I also think it says quite a lot about the rugby boy and now the rugby girl, that you need a little bit of rebellion in you, and every so often it's good to have someone who actually does things differently.
For over 400 years, rugby was a school only for boys. In 1976, rugby opened its doors to girls, but only in the 6th form. 1993 saw a big change, with girls joining throughout the school. Now, 210 of the school's 710 pupils are girls.
Although there are fewer girls than boys, there aren't any major difficulties. I think the one problem is sport. Because rugby was invented here, the boys are very proud of their sports, and girls' sports tend to be pushed into the background. But apart from that, we're treated equally.
What do you think are the benefits of being at rugby?
Well, I think there are very good facilities here. Every aspect of the academic life is catered for. There's a new library's just been opened. We've got a sports centre, gym, a drama studio, music facilities. So there's never any time to be bored. There's always something you can go off and do. And also in a boarding school, the friendships you make are very close as well. So I think that's enjoyable too.
So you have a special role in the school. Can you
explain what that is? Well, I'm head of Dean House, which is one of the girls' houses, and that means that on an administration level I have to help with the running of the house. I have to work with my housemaster and mistress to give certain people certain jobs they have to do in the house. But I also have to get to know the girls quite well so I can help them with small problems they might have and tell the housemaster and mistress how everyone is getting on in the school. I usually get up about 7:30. We have breakfast at 8, and then on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays we have to go to chapel at 8:30, so I have to gather everyone up and usher them into the chapel where we have a short service before the lessons.
Do you feel that you get enough free time?
Yes, I think that a good thing about being at this school is you can decide how much you do. They do have the facilities, but you don't have to use them. So you can decide what you do and how much free time you have.
I think if we were given more free time, we'd find out that we were pretty bored if we were given too much. So I think we do have enough free time, yes.
Does the school only aim for academic excellence?
Not at all. That's at the centre of what one does, and I think for a member of the teaching staff, the most important thing is to get the teaching right, and everything else stems from that. But being a boarding school, we're trying to do a huge number of other things. And ironically, the universities now tend to look more at the academic side of things, but the next stage, employment, thank goodness, goes back to the other qualities of all-round excellence, of being able to do several things, of being able to see things through and plan things through to the end, leadership, teamwork, all that kind of thing. These are very important qualities, and employers, thank goodness, start to look at that. Universities are not so interested, but we care a lot about all the other things that happen outside the classroom.
Life at rugby certainly isn't all work and no play. There's a surprising range of activities outside of the classroom, from rock bands and scuba diving
to making television programs in the school's media centre. Many old rugbyans, as the school's former pupils are known, have gone on to fame and fortune. Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, was at rugby. Other famous pupils include the poet Rupert Brooke and Neville Chamberlain, who was the British Prime Minister at the beginning of the Second World War. So what do you hope to do after you leave rugby?
After I leave rugby, I think I've decided on the media. I know what I'm going to do for A-levels. I think I'll do English, French and Spanish, and maybe study English at university.
What do you hope to do when you leave rugby?
Well, I hope to go to university. I've been offered a place at university to study archaeology and anthropology. So I have to get certain grades. And if I get 3 A's, I'll be able to go to Cambridge next year to study that.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
What do you hope that each pupil will take with them from rugby?
Something different. I'd hate them all to be the same. And I would hope that each one is able to develop his or her particular interest or excellence. I'd want them, first of all, to be able to work hard. The habit here is academic work. When they go on to be bankers, vets, farmers, whatever it might be, they must work hard at that particular discipline. I would like them to have a sense of fun, and I believe that school ought to be fun. If they're here for 5 years and haven't enjoyed those 5 years, there's something wrong. And I would like them also to have just a tiny sense, I say tiny because obviously one wouldn't survive if it was too great, a tiny sense of rebellion. I don't think they ought to take things for granted, and they ought to be able to say, well, why are we doing things this way? Isn't there a better way of doing it? And can't we make the world a better place somehow?
This is Cáceres, a medieval town in the province of Extremadura. It's the setting for a festival of music and dance. The performers come from all over the world. The organisers predict that it will attract nearly 30,000 people.
WOMAD stands for World of Music, Arts and Dance, and primarily that is the identity of a music and dance festival. WOMAD began in 1981 as the direct result of ideas and inspiration that came from Peter Gabriel. Peter's idea was, well, perhaps I could share a stage with a group that comes from somewhere else, and in doing that, introduce my audience to that music from somewhere new. And in 1982 we produced our first festival, which happened in July in Somerset in the United Kingdom.
Well, I don't have those no feelings that make good heartbreak songs. This is the hardest song to write, 'cause I know I'm in the wrong, and all I've got is guilt.
The idea of WOMAD is to create a truly eclectic international festival which features both music and dance. And our aim with that very eclectic programming of music, we hope the best music and dance drawn from anywhere around the world. Our aim is to introduce that music and dance to a wider audience, an open-minded audience, anywhere the festival can find that audience.
This is the Plaza Mayor, the main square in the old town of Cáceres. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the festival begins in just over 3 hours from now. At the moment, it's quiet, but by tonight, I think it might be very different.
Is this the only stage?
No, we have another stage about 200 metres up into the old town, and a further, smaller workshop stage, which is on top of the hill in the old town.
How many people are involved in building the stage?
Well, in building the stage itself would be 2 British people and 4 Spanish. Then with the sound and lights, there's about 10 Dutch people who do the sound and about 6 Belgians who do the lights.
People from all over the place?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, it's nearly 8 o'clock, and unusually it's raining here in Cáceres. But the festival has started, and the crowd are here at the second stage, waiting to see Shakisha, a South African band, who are playing here tonight. And here they are now.
So you organise festivals all over the world?
Yes, we do. That's primarily what WOMAD does. Our function is to organise these international musical events which occur in many continents, in America, in the Far East, in Europe primarily. And alongside that, we also work as an educational charity, which is called the WOMAD Foundation. And the foundation organises participatory and educational elements to each festival alongside its performance elements.
We have workshops here at Cáceres at the WOMAD Festival to allow people to gain an insight into the different cultures of the musicians attending the festival. For example, Joji Hirota is running a workshop in Japanese percussion, and there we will understand more about his culture, his religion and his music.
Yes, and his skills as well.
And his skills, which are very strong indeed.
So anybody can come along to these, is that right?
Anyone can come along to a workshop, yes.
So what sort of people turn up?
We have many students and also general members of the public who have an interest in music, arts and dance.
Try just detach at once. One. Yeah. Instead of going to... Try. Okay, don't touch.
So the festival here in Cáceres, when did that first begin?
I think the first time we came here was in 1991, and this is now the 4th edition that we've been lucky enough to present here.
How many performers are there here this year?
I think overall this weekend it's something like 24 different groups that come from 19 different countries.
Are you going to put on any more festivals this year?
Yes, we are. We will be having another festival in Spain in 2 weeks' time in the city of Granada. Then we have a festival in Estonia in its capital city, Tallinn. Then we have 2 festivals in the United Kingdom, one in Reading and one in Morecambe Bay. We have one in Japan in the port city of Yokohama, also one in Olbia in Sardinia, a small event in Helsinki in Finland, and perhaps 1 or 2 more will be confirmed by the end of the year.
In the Plaza Mayor, the festival is in full swing. WOMAD have brought together a unique mixture of performers from very different backgrounds. The result is a magical combination of styles, colours, melodies and rhythms.